I think originally I was like, my goal is to consume 10,000 calories a day because you burn way more than that. And then over time, I mean, it just becomes kind of depressing, especially because it's a lot of junk food, and by junk food, I mean like candy bars, soda, sweets, because it's just terrible for your mouth. You're like, oh, I just want like a piece of pizza or a sandwich. And then it's like, well, what's portable? What can you actually bring with you? What can you eat while you're riding? If I'm carrying it, when I get it, I'm not eating it right away because I'm like never trying to get to the point where I'm like bonked or super hungry. So it's like, okay, I might pack a burger and eat it 2 hours later or eat it 12 hours later. And that does not taste good.
Welcome to episode 47 of the Eat for Endurance podcast, featuring ultra-endurance cyclist Lael Wilcox. Lael is one of the best, if not the best, ultra-endurance cyclists in the world. After years of bike touring, she began racing in 2014 and immediately established herself as a total badass. It would take too much time to go through all of her athletic accomplishments, but I'll include just a few highlights. And by the way, keep in mind that all of these adventures are 100% self-supported and often done solo. In 2015, she smashed the women's record in the Tour Divide, which is a 2,745-mile event, despite getting bronchitis and literally having to bike herself into the ER to get medical treatment right in the middle of her race. And just to give you a sense of the sheer number of miles that she logs on her bike in such relatively short periods of time, it's worth mentioning that she also rode her bike 2,100 miles to the start line of that race. And then not long after she finished it, she raced the entire Tour Divide all over again by herself because she knew she could ride it faster without getting sick this time, and she did. She improved her time by 2 days. In 2016, she was the overall winner of the Trans Am, a 4,200-mile bike race that crosses the U.S. from the west to the east coast. By overall, I mean outright. She beat men and women. In 2017 and again in 2020, she cycled 4,500 miles across Alaska, her home state. And in 2018, she finished second overall on the Navad 1000, which is a 1,000-kilometer race with nearly 100,000 feet of climbing through the Swiss Alps. And in 2019, she finished second overall in the Silk Road Mountain Race, an 1,800-kilometer event in Kyrgystan that includes hundreds of kilometers of incredibly remote sections without opportunities to resupply. These are just some of her many, many accomplishments in the sport, and as you can imagine, planning and executing nutrition for such demanding and logistically challenging athletic endeavors is just mind-boggling. On top of all of this, she runs girls' biking mentorship programs and offers women's biking scholarships, which is, of course, really awesome. She is my first ultra-endurance cyclist on the podcast, and I will confess I only fairly recently learned more about this sport. One of my private nutrition clients is an endurance cyclist. You know who you are. Thanks for the heads up here, and encouraged me to reach out to Lael for an interview, and I'm so glad that he did. I know many of my listeners are runners. I am, of course, a runner too, and I'm not sure how many endurance cyclists I have in my audience, but either way, I know you will be inspired by Lael, and I can't wait to share her nutrition story with you. So without further ado, please enjoy my interview with Lael Wilcox. Lael, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I've had a ton of ultra runners on the show. I'm a runner myself, but no ultra endurance cyclist. So I'm really excited to chat about your nutrition. I'm sure there are some major differences there.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is it's way easier to eat on the bike. You're not moving around quite as much, so it's like you could really eat anything, pizza, spaghetti, whatever, as long as you can manage to eat it while going, 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I read that you tend to eat most of your meals or snacks or whatever while riding. That must be very challenging.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, though. It's like it saves so much time if you can not stop, because your average speed goes down so much if you stop to eat. So if you can just keep going, even if you slow down a little bit, overall, it's such a gain.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that must be a skill that you develop too. I mean, just as like us runners, we learn to like eat while running and ripping things open and make sure we're not tripping on whatever's in front of us. Like that must be such a skill where you're riding at 20 miles an hour and like dealing with packages, or maybe that determines the types of things you reach for. But
Yeah.
I mean, we're definitely going to get into all of this discussion. I'm sure there's so many wild stories you're going to be sharing. But we'll put that aside for a second, because I always like to kick off these interviews by going back to your nutrition roots. So growing up in Anchorage, what was, the food scene like in your house? What are some of your earliest food memories?
Yeah, I mean, my mom was a great cook growing up, and she made us dinner every night, and we ate as a family. So I feel super grateful to have had kind of that past. Yeah, that's the main thing I remember. And, I didn't grow up really. I did grow up in Alaska, but I played kind of more traditional sports, soccer and basketball, where it's like, at halftime you have some orange slices, and that's about it.
Yeah. And you have a few siblings, right?
I do. I have two sisters and a brother.
Are they athletic as well?
Not really. Nobody in my family is. I mean, they like to go for walks. Sometimes they go cross country skiing. They like to spend time outside, but, not competitive at all.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, I'm obviously like nowhere near an athlete as you, but I'm also one of like pretty much the only active person in my family. And I find it so strange and intriguing, like how that happens. And I mean, especially for someone like you, I mean, you're such a force in your sport, and then your family isn't as athletic. That's a very interesting tidbit. But you didn't start cycling until age 20, and as you said, you were still active in these other sports. And you even, I read you love to run, and you finished your first marathon age 18. You were competing in your university's cross country team. So I'm just curious, as you started to participate in these sports, did you start to view nutrition differently in any way, especially as you started to become more competitive? Before you started racing, of course, this is well before the cycling time happened. But yeah, how did your view of food change, if at all, during high school, college years?
I mean, I think, a sad part of it is that as a female runner, there's so much pressure to be kind of skinny that that didn't cause me major problems, but it was always kind of like a background thing. Like if you're skinnier, you'll be faster. But I never really had that tiny build. So there was not really, I wasn't too focused on that, but I did see the women around me kind of struggling with that, which was tough because it's like we have these beautiful bodies that can do these amazing things. And it's like, why would we feel limited because we're not skinny enough or that kind of thing? Because it actually didn't end up affecting the results in that way. But I did go through it. So I was on an exchange in Denmark in high school. I lived there for a year, and I, the food there was not great. It was like a lot of meat and potatoes and not a lot of produce. So, and when you're living with a different family, you don't really have control over what you eat. So when I came back, I became a vegetarian. I was 16, I think, or 17, and I started eating like super, super healthy and really cared a lot about that. And I think that was the first time I ever really thought about my nutrition, and then I think over time I kind of relaxed on how, kind of strict I was at that time. I was like, no soda, no French fries, no candy, all this stuff. It's like we can go into kind of an extreme where it's almost like a cult or something, like I'm only eating healthy food. And then the funny thing is now I'm an endurance athlete where it's like often I'm just resupplying at the gas station, where it's like, well, what healthy food is available, or what real food is available. So I'm always kind of looking for something that resembles real food, and sometimes it's really hard to find. It's like tomato juice or string cheese instead of just eating Snickers all day.
Yeah, or drinking melted ice cream, as I saw you often do.
Yeah, that's more real though, and you're like, well, at least this is cream. Yeah, and then the thing is, it's also like, what's portable? What can you actually carry? And what looks appealing after 7 days out there? It's like, what could you actually stomach? But it's like my first long race was a 400-mile road race that the cutoff time was 32 hours. And that's really when it clicked for me that I was like, oh my gosh, for endurance, eating is part of the job. It's like, it's your job to eat as much as you can, pretty much, because that's how you'll like continue to be fueled and get the best results. It's like, because it's like you can't like stop eating hour 10 and then expect to keep riding hour 20. And it's so during that first race, I was like, that's when it clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to eat like it's my job. I have to eat every hour, and then I have to think of what could I possibly eat? Potato chips, chocolate milk, or whatever's available. And it becomes like almost like a joke, but it's definitely like such an important part of it.
Absolutely. And just going back to kind of your earlier athletic days, and especially as a runner, where do you think that pressure came from? And why do you think that you were maybe not immune to it, but that you were able to kind of resist some of the struggle that some of your teammates or peers ended up, really struggling with?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's unique to sports. It's like women's kind of body image, all over the place in magazines, in Hollywood, on TV, like all this stuff you see is like skinny is good,
Yeah.
and that's like kind of what we were. Or, I mean, I feel like it's getting a bit better, but I feel like that was just kind of the focus, or it's like you couldn't avoid thinking that way, and then I mean, maybe because I was just always so much more muscular than the women I ran with, that I was like, well, that's just not my body type. So it was like not even an option. The other thing about me is that it's like I can't not eat. Like if I'm hungry, I have to eat. If I don't eat, I'll wake up in the night and eat. So it's kind of like that's personally like I'm not gonna like kind of not be able to eat or maybe get into that like other people would, just because it's like my body, my mind will like wake me up, and then it's like, okay, you have to eat, and that's just how it is. So it's like having kind of treating food with some kind of respect and honor of like sitting down to meals and enjoying it, and having it combined with like a social experience is definitely my preference. I don't always get to do that because sometimes you just don't have enough time, or I'm trying to ride 20 hours a day and I'm just eating on the bike. But I do feel like it's such a big part of culture, and such a wonderful thing to share with other people, that I really respect that.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned that, you did go through a period of time where you became vegetarian. It was, I mean, it sounds like it was kind of like the aftermath of Denmark or whatever you want to call it, where you kind of were like, okay, I'm going to eat all these healthy foods. But it sounds like it almost kind of became a little bit, not extreme, but you were kind of creating these rules for yourself and all that. Did that ever feel unhealthy to you? And what kind of snapped you out of that?
I mean, I think it was kind of like an experiment where I was like, these are like, this is healthy food. This is what I'm going to eat, which was great, great to kind of try that out. I think eventually, so I was vegetarian for 5 years, which was good because growing up, I didn't really like meat that much anyways. And I felt great. And then I started traveling a bit more, went back to Europe, was living in France, and it was so kind of culturally offensive for me to
Oh,
like
yeah.
not eat the meat that people were preparing, and
Yeah.
it became like so uncomfortable to like even say I was vegetarian or like not eat the thing somebody made, that I was just like, forget it, this is like not worth it. And I came back like at that time, it's like if you're vegetarian for long enough, it's really hard to start eating meat again. Like it makes you actually sick,
Yeah.
and then so I was like, well, I gotta kind of ease my way back into eating meat because this is just like, it's not working socially for me anymore. It's like I need to be able to sit down at the table and eat whatever anybody's eating, which I feel grateful to have that ability too. I don't have any allergies. I don't really have any food restrictions or problems. So I, I came back and started eating meat again. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? Someone in my family was like, well, my biggest suggestion is just to chew a lot. It's like, I was just started laughing because I'm like, that sounds ridiculous, but it's actually great advice. You're like, you have to like digest this food, chew the meat a lot, get your body like primed to eat it, and it'll actually work out. And so that was the start. And then, it didn't take long to kind of incorporate it back into my diet. But I mean, that was, at this point, I think I was 20 when I started eating meat again, or 18, or maybe 22. So it's been a good decade. And now I just eat whatever, I mean, now it's like maybe I eat less meat, but more because it's just bad for the planet to eat meat, so, but I can sit down with people and eat whatever's on the table, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when, you're probably one of my more well-traveled guests on this show. I mean, you've been to so many different countries. And then, of course, the nature of your sport, you're in just so many locations, some of which are remote, and sometimes you just can't be picky about what you grab, right? So it's not always a luxury to be able to be picky about what you eat. But I mean, what you described just made me think about, I don't know if you've ever cycled around Vietnam at all, but I was in Vietnam a while back, and we were just so sick of eating pork. I just couldn't eat any more pork. And I don't really eat a whole lot of pork. I'm Jewish, but I don't keep kosher, but whatever. I still am not a huge pork fan. And I was just at the end of the trip, we go to this restaurant and we're like, we would like something vegetarian. And they just looked at us kind of confused and like, oh yes, sure. And they bring this dish, and it's like, I forget what kind of dish it was, but it had little pieces of pork in it versus huge pieces. I was like, this is not vegetarian. And I remember another time in Italy, the waiter literally did not understand. They had a meat cart, and they just didn't understand when we didn't want the meat because we were just so sick of it. Yeah, so I get it, and it's just, I think nowadays it's more well accepted, but a while back, not so much. So totally get
it. It's just totally out there. They're it's mind blowing. It's wait, what? You're not going to eat this? And then it's offensive, and then it's also they just can't wrap their heads around, and then it's in the end it's well, you got to eat something. So
well, food food is love, food is culture, food is so many things, and it's such a big part of when you travel, you experience that culture, that country. And as you said, I mean, it's such a huge part of it, and it's a big part of fueling yourself. So, it's better if you have more flexibility as much as you can. So speaking of world travel, cycling for you started out as a way to commute locally, but after college, it became the way in which you traveled and really experienced the world. I imagine your nutrition during these years must have been really interesting, because for a big chunk of the year, you're living on your bike, you're traveling in so many foreign countries, and I'm sure you must have some wild stories to share on the food front, so definitely want to hear those. But then another huge chunk of the year, you're working in a restaurant, I assume mostly in one location, to earn money for your next adventure. So I'm really curious, what did your nutrition look like during these times, your kind of early bike touring years?
Oh yeah, I mean, then too, I was dirt poor, so that was another part of it, where I was I can't afford whatever food I want. So then when I'm on the road on the bike, I'm eating rice and beans pretty much. That was pretty much it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, sometimes even back when I was working, I would be eating that, but then I would also just try to eat whatever I could at the restaurant. So, any messed up orders, or they'd let you have free soup or whatever, the leftovers. It was pretty much like that. But I must have worked in at least 20 different restaurants, because I'd end a trip and then be in some town and then just get a job. So I worked in Key West, Florida. I worked in Annapolis, Maryland. I worked in Tacoma, Washington, Albuquerque, all over the country. So then it would be whatever that restaurant's focused on. But I tried to pick places that had really good fresh food, because that's also what I want to eat anyway. And I'm happy to serve that to people. So that was a big part of it too. But yeah, on the road, it was definitely spending as little money as possible. And then some countries, it's well, the food is very inexpensive anyway. Traveling down into Mexico was delicious food, low prices. That was great. Yeah, and then you find out what's actually available while you're out there. Traveling in the Middle East, it was delicious food. It's hummus and flatbreads and so many good fresh fruits and vegetables and dates and halva and all this great food. And then I'm doing a race across Kyrgyzstan, and these people are nomadic, and there's nothing out there. When you finally find something, it's some really old crackers. some old fried bread, it's just like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, you figure out, or like riding across South Africa, like they just love meat.
Yeah.
That's like all you find. And then I ride through Lesotho, this tiny mountain country in South Africa, and there's like nothing but like cornmeal. You're like, okay. But I mean, it kind of does give you a perspective, because it's like, well, if that's all I'm finding, that's all people are eating here too. It's like, wow, that's pretty limited.
Yeah. What are your most memorable food moments from your travels during, these early bike touring years?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, that's the cool thing about traveling by bike, is that, you pass through these different places and people always invite you in. They want to feed you, because they're like,
Awesome.
oh, you're on a bike, you're outside, you're hungry. And then sometimes, it's like you don't even speak the same language as them, so they just keep setting plates of food in front of you. I think riding through Albania is like, they have like their main thing are their shepherds. They have sheep, and then they have like sheep's milk products. So then I go into this like little hut, and this old lady is just putting like different versions of yogurt and cheese and just different sheep dairy products like in front of me. And then, not saying anything. She's just like waiting for me to eat them.
Oh my God. You must have a really strong stomach. You must have such a strong stomach.
You're just like trying this different stuff and just like smiling and nodding your head, or oh my gosh, or that whole region, like the Balkans, not only food, but they're like distilling their own liquor. And they're like, they all want you to like drink with them.
Yes,
and then
I've been in that situation.
Do it. There's like rakia, and they're like, hey, because like also they don't want to drink alone, so it's like, oh great,
Oh, yeah.
now I have a visitor, and now we can have a party. Or like Ukraine, same thing, but I mean that was actually just vodka. But it's like, it's like such a funny thing. It's like that's how people kind of get together. They like invite you in. It's like, or they might have coffee, or you could have tea, or you could have vodka, some kind of food, and then it's always something different. And I mean, I don't think there was ever any food where I was like, oh my God, I really don't want to drink that. In Kyrgyzstan, they had fermented camel's milk, I think, or no, fermented mare's milk, like horse milk. And I was like, no,
that makes me cringe.
I'm not drinking that. That was where I like drew the line, where I was like, I don't want that. Because it's like, you could also say no and just drink tea or something, but I'm like, oh dear God, no way. I'm not drinking
so hard,
that.
though, because you don't speak their language. You don't want to offend. They're like being hospitable. But like also the difference, by the way, is like you're getting like trashed on whatever. I mean, because this homemade stuff, and I definitely have experienced that abroad before. This homemade stuff is really strong, and you have to get back on a bike, and they don't have to do that. I was on a biking trip, like just backpacking. We stayed with a local family. My husband basically was in a drinking contest with this, like, she must have been like 100-year-old toothless woman. My husband was like puking everywhere. The old woman was like perfectly fine. Oh my God. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, you're like, is this stuff gonna make me blind? Yeah. What is this?
Yeah, what is this? Oh man. I mean, that's part of the big adventure, though. And you're young, and you're like, well, I'll be okay.
You're like, whatever. We'll just see how this goes.
Oh my goodness. I mean, and along those lines, I mean, touring is not racing, obviously, but you're still burning a ton of energy. You're spending so much time on the bike. So I'm curious, like, I mean, I'm guessing that your fueling strategies, it was pretty relaxed. It's not like, I'm guessing you didn't have any kind of routine or, plan. It was just kind of, what can I find? But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Tell me a little bit about how you made sure that you were, kind of keeping on top of things during bike touring.
Oh yeah, it was just whatever you can find. And I mean, the other part too is that, it's like you don't want to carry tons and tons of stuff, or you realize you don't want to carry stuff around that you don't actually want to eat. I mean, even now it's like sometimes you have like kind of like emergency reserve food. Like basically I'll bring like, this tastes good too, but it's so high calorie that I'm like, I'll just leave it in my bag, like a couple of packets of trail butter. It's like an almond butter mix.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, then it's kind of like mentally nice to know, like, oh God, if like I end up, for 12 hours without being able to find anything, at least I have this and I'll get through, but otherwise it's like, you don't want to carry tons and tons of food. And then you end up riding through like Europe and you're like, oh, this is a dream. Like, I don't have to carry anything. I'll always find a small town that has a bakery, has a cafe, has like a farmer's market, and that's like living it up. But then you're like traveling through Alaska, where I'm from, and you're like, okay, I'm definitely not going to see food for 3 days. And then it gets a little bleak. But then you're in like the most beautiful place in the world. So it's like, well, that's the compromise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was going to be one of my later questions about, emergency planning and all that. So it sounds like your kind of emergency plan is to keep something in reserve, that it's like, I will not eat this unless I'm in a really dire situation.
And then I end up eating it like every time.
Oh no!
Like, all right, well, it's time for that, and then you're just like, well, I'll make it, whatever, because it ends up happening. It's like the store's closed or whatever. But I try to have just like backup, and it's basically like, nut butter is kind of my backup because it's so high calorie, and because I've eaten so much of it over the years, because it's such a go-to, that I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to eat that right away.
Sure. You can't eat your reasonable. You can't eat your emergency ration. Water, I feel like, is the bigger issue, and I have like 1,000 questions for you about when we get into race nutrition, but I may as well touch upon it a little bit now with the touring situation, because you were still going through some very remote sections, and water, that's a little bit trickier because you obviously can only carry so much. Mm-hmm. So, what was your kind of strategy when you were in all these foreign countries that you maybe weren't as familiar with? You're not scouting out the course as I know you do with your races often. What did you do about water and making sure you had enough and it was safe?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most challenging places for water have definitely been more of the desert trips. Like I scouted this super long route, 1,800 miles down the Baja Peninsula, called the Baja Divide, and it's basically a desert, the whole thing. But then it's like the Pacific on one side, Sea of Cortez on the other, but there's really no water. So that was harder as far as like, especially scouting the route. I didn't know where, the resupply points would be or if there was any surface water. So for that trip, I was carrying up to 10 liters of water on my bike, which is insanely heavy and bulky and awkward. Carrying water sucks. Where do you put it? I don't want to carry a backpack because it's like you sit heavy and it's not good. So it's like you have these huge reservoirs in my frame bag on my bike. I had water on my fork blades on my bike, and that was just kind of necessary because you just don't know when you're going to find it. But typically with water, as far as water safety, like if it's good to drink, if it's not good to drink, then it will more or less be widely available to purchase. And if it's really not good to drink, people will be buying water. So then you just rely on buying it in different places. Otherwise, when I started touring, I think I had like a water pump or something like that to purify it. And then I rode from Alaska down to the rest of the U.S. through Canada to get to the start of the Tour Divide, this long race through the Rockies. And I had brought one of those kind of UV water purifying sticks. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't even think this is doing anything. So I just sent it home and I was like, forget it. And then from then on, that was in 2015, I just drink it. I drink any water I find.
No, like right out of the source?
Yes. Like,
oh my God.
And sometimes it is pretty freaky. Like, oh, you definitely see cows and animals, and I'm like, whatever, I'm just gonna drink it. And
you don't get sick?
And I don't get sick.
You were like a freak of nature, man. Like, I don't know how you handle that.
I'm like, whatever, I know it's risky, but I'm so sick of like all this kind of purifying, carrying, wasting all this time. I'm like, I'm just drinking it.
Wow. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to knock on all the wood around, knock, that your luck continues because, wow, amazing.
I know you get so sick. And then of course,
know.
because I do that, everybody tells me like their worst stories.
Yes, I'm sure.
But it's
I am
working
sure.
out. It's
It's
been
working out until it doesn't.
7
But yeah.
years. So
Oh, that's nuts. But I have great respect for you. That's incredible. All right, let's back up because I have so many other questions. Before we move on, I totally forgot to ask you, as a runner, I just have to ask, do you still run at all? I know you did some ultras after,
yeah.
when you got into cycling. Is running still in your life?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I do. But you know what? I actually got more into long distance cycling because I had an Achilles injury. And this was like 2014, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I had such a bad, and actually I was injured. I was working in a restaurant that the dining room was up a flight of stairs. And I blew up my Achilles going up and down the stairs.
Oh, that's such a bummer.
Which is so terrible. We had just opened the restaurant. I was working like 14-hour shifts. I mean, that's like endurance in itself. And then my Achilles, like my whole ankle swelled up so much that I couldn't see any of the bones. And I was like, this is not good. But I had no idea what was happening because I'd never had that happen before. And then I was basically so injured that I was still working, but I couldn't run for like a year. And I was so distraught because I love running so much. I was like, oh my God, I felt like somebody died, because it's like you can't do the one thing you love to do. So then I just started riding farther and farther. I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to ride because I was so frustrated that I started I was borrowing my mom's road bike and like riding to the next city, 130 miles away on my days off, just to kind of vent. And that's when I found out that I could really ride. But it was from being injured from running. And then since then, I've just been much more protective of it. I run for like an hour and I'm like super happy with that. And I'm like, I don't want to push it because I feel like it might just not be as sustainable as cycling for me. So it's kind of like I keep it like special.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like how many times a week would you run? Or is it not even a weekly thing?
Oh yeah. Like last week I probably ran 3 times in the week.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's like a regular part of your whole routine.
Especially if like my day's limited as far as like how much time I can spend riding, then I'm like, I can just do a quick run. Because I feel like it's such an efficient workout.
Oh, yeah.
And then, it doesn't take any time to get ready. You're just out the door. I'll run for like 6 miles, something like that. It's like nothing huge, but just to get out there. And I've been trying to run like a little bit faster again, really get my heart rate up. And that's been super fun.
Awesome.
Because I haven't done that for years. So I love it. But it's like just basically, running on the bike path, all flat, super easy, very low key, but I still love it.
Yeah. And you were pretty fast, actually. You ran that first marathon in 3:18, I saw. So you have, I mean, clearly you're a talented athlete overall, but you're a talented runner as well. Anywho, okay, let's get into race nutrition now. You kicked off your racing career in 2014. I guess that kind of coincides with that injury then, right? That's kind of what led you into it, it sounds like. Yeah, and you quickly made quite the impression on the whole bike racing scene. And I don't want to waste time rehashing, all the racing accomplishments you have, and there are hundreds of articles out there on that, obviously. But I do want to set the stage for a nutrition discussion, only because I'm pretty sure I have listeners out there who may not be familiar with you and your sport. So please bear with me just for a moment while I go through a few of the things that you've done and just, again, kind of set the stage here. So you're typically doing multi-day, sometimes multi-week long bike packing events that are 100% self-supported. You're barely sleeping along the way. You're often in remote locations. And again, just to give some example of the events you've done, you mentioned the Tour Divide. That's 2,745 miles that runs the length of the Rockies. You finished that in 15 days and 11 hours, which is super fast, but it's also a really long period of time for you to be doing this, obviously. You won outright the Trans Am bike race. That's 4,200 miles in just over 18 days. You've done like some stuff in the Swiss Alps, climbing 100,000 feet in 4 days and 10 hours. You've done other countless races, FKTs, and other self-supported adventures since then. So just wanted to throw that all out there to demonstrate that what you do is truly mind-boggling, especially when I began to think about the nutrition, because it's not just a question of getting in the enormous amount of calories that you require to keep going and performing at such a high level, but, also the nutrition planning and the execution of all, which we've already kind of touched on, especially since you can't carry that much. All right. So that the stage is set. Let's kick off this discussion. We've already talked a little bit about how you kind of can scout a course out ahead of time. And that's part of your nutrition, hydration prep. So I just want to hear a little bit more about what this may look like, and also what you do to prep for races in more remote locations. Like I know the Silk Road Mountain Race has some pretty long sections without resupply. So yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about that first?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that kind of run through. That's so cool to even think about all that stuff. But yeah, I mean,
you've done
really,
a lot.
So the basic thing is, when I started the really long stuff like Tour Divide or something that's going to take 2 weeks, I think originally I was like, my goal is to consume 10,000 calories a day, because you burn way more than that. And then over time, I mean, it just becomes kind of depressing, right? You're just like, especially because it's a lot of junk food, and by junk food, I mean like candy bars, soda, sweets, because it's just terrible for your mouth. You're like, oh, I just want like a piece of pizza or a sandwich. So really, I do try to find as much like of food that resembles real food along the way as I can. If that's sandwiches, burritos, even hot dogs, I'm like, well, at least it tastes like normal. So and then it's like, well, what's portable? What can you actually bring with you? What can you eat while you're riding? I mean, most things, maybe not like spaghetti. I don't know. Maybe you can. I have brought that Ziploc bag before. I've even had people like wrap up, pancakes and scrambled eggs and bacon in bags or in like tin foil just to take it to go, because it's like you just want something real. But then it's like also this stuff, if I'm carrying it when I get it, I'm not eating it right away, because I'm like never trying to get to the point where I'm like bonked or super hungry. So it's like, okay, I might pack a burger and eat it 2 hours later or eat it 12 hours later, and that does not taste good.
12 hours later?
Hamburger and French fries, woo! But then it's like, it's self-supported, so there's not really much I can do, because I might go like a couple 100 miles with no food resupply. So then I'm like, well, this is what I have, I've got to eat it. And in some cases, it's like you don't know the place you're getting the food from. You get like, oh my gosh, you're in the Trans Am in Sisters, Oregon. I got like 2 massive burritos and took them to go. And then I started eating it, and I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever tasted. And there was nothing open. It was like a Sunday. I was in Eastern Oregon in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing open. So then I'm like, oh, this is what I have to eat for the next 24 hours. And I did. I just ate it all. Because you can't.
Why was it so bad?
Oh, it was just terrible. It was just like, oh, it was like this like shredded chicken and bell peppers, and it just tasted so bad. I was like, oh God, what is this? But you don't know it's going to be like that. You're like, oh, a chicken burrito, that'll be pretty good. No way. Oh God, so bad. But then I found like something like pizza. It's like, well, that tastes good, cold, hot, whatever. Even if it's like terrible quality, it still tastes fine. So that's a winner for sure.
What are some of your favorite things to eat while training, or foods or products or anything?
Oh yeah, I mean, actually, the past couple of years, so I started working with Gnarly for nutrition, and because then I'm like, I totally came from the background where I was like, it doesn't matter what you eat, you just have to keep eating. And I said that, and then they were like, actually, it does. But they were so cool about it. They were like, we understand that you only have access to so many different like food supplies while you're out there in the middle of nowhere, but they're like, we're trying to find like a compromise where it's like you can definitely have some good nutrition and then pair it with whatever else you find. So they talked me into drinking these vegan recovery protein shakes mixed with like a Power Greens mix every morning and every night. So I'll sleep for like 4 hours. So I like shake one of these up, I go to sleep, wake up and drink one. And I was like, all right, I'll try it out. And oh my gosh, it made the world of difference. I was like, whoa, I feel so much better. And I was like, totally thought this was all bogus. So actually, I mean, you can help yourself out, but then it's like for, 2 weeks, how many of those can I carry?
That
You
was me,
know?
my question. Yeah, so how do you balance that? Because you need to carry so little and you're focused on efficiency and speed. So do you not carry enough for your entire trip, or what do you do?
I mean, so I used this last summer. My longest races were like 4 days, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, 4 days, I could definitely carry enough. 8 of those, that's not so much. I can get that in my seat pack, okay. If it was like 14 days, I had a plan to ship myself some to a post office. And then I was like, if they're open when I go through, I'll pick them up. If not, I'll deal with it. It's fine.
And that's
Um,
okay with the rules of being
yeah,
self-supported?
exactly. That's
Okay.
like,
Okay, good. Okay.
and it depends on the race too. Some races are like, nope. Some races are like, oh, you could send yourself something to the post office. One race in Switzerland, they're like, we have a depot halfway. You can like put together a box and we'll leave it in this location for you. So
Oh,
really
that's
depends
nice.
on the event. But yeah,
Got it.
if there's something like that, then I'm like, oh, I could stash them for the second half. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, yeah. So now it's like before I used to be more focused on like consuming more. Now I'm like pretty much in these races, like something that takes like 10 days. I'm even 5 days, like I'm gonna lose weight. Just because like I just can't eat enough to keep up. And I also don't want to stress out about that. Like
Yeah.
when it's longer, I'll just eat more when I feel like I need to eat. Stuff that's like a little trickier are events that are like 24 hours because you're going at a faster pace, you're not stopping to sleep, and you need more calories for all of those hours. Like I did a
Mm.
24-hour mountain bike race 3 days ago, which was so much fun. Oh my God, I loved it. And that the format for that was riding 16-mile loops,
Hmm.
and then but it could be supported, so you could like stop, get a Coke, eat whatever along the way. But for that, it was like, well, how much time are you going to take to eat something and then get back on the bike and do it again and again? And it's all single track, so it's like you can't really eat while you ride
Mm.
because it's technical. So for that, I had like all these like gnarly this fueling drink, which was great. I had Coke, I had coconut water, I had 3 Ensures, like those old
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
drinks. They were great. I had like Asian noodles, I had potato salad, but I'm like, how much do you actually want to eat? But I was like, I know I need this. So I just kept eating.
That must have
Um,
felt so luxurious.
yeah, it really was,
Having like a
and then
little aid station there.
exactly. My wife, Rue, was there. She's like, what do you want on the next lap? And then she'd get it like ready to go. But it's like,
Amazing.
you're also so fried, it's like, even then I'm like 20 hours into this and I'm like, I don't know, anything savory, nothing sweet, basically that. And that's it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you mentioned kind of a more of a sports drink. Are you ever kind of taking in sports drinks or salts, like salt pills or any other kind of sport products on these races that you do, kind of the more typical longer form races, or is it really just the protein shakes that you've been bringing?
I also do, so Gnarly has this Fuel 2O that's like branched chain amino acids and calories. And
Mm.
those are great. So I'll drink that. No salt pills, but I just eat super salty food.
Hmm.
Um, what else? I mean, I take caffeine.
Yeah, caffeine pills.
Yeah, usually during the longer race, I'll have like one caffeine pill in the morning when I
Huh.
wake up. It kicks in like about an hour, and then I'm like flying high. Like, yeah, because it's like such a mood lifter. You
Oh
feel
yeah.
so good.
Do you
I
take
use an
caffeine at night?
inhaler. No caffeine
Okay.
at night because it not unless I don't want to sleep.
Yeah.
But the other thing is
Okay.
like even sleeping during this stuff, it's like I try to sleep like 4 hours a night, but it's hard because your heart rate is so high.
Mm.
So then trying to like mellow out to sleep because I know if I sleep, I'll recover, I'll be able to ride better the next day. So I usually do some meditating at night to fall asleep. And I'm like
Hmm.
laying in the dirt, breathing deeply, and then the next thing I know, I'm asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, there's just like so much going on there. And kind of going back to the prep part, I mean, as you were saying, like gas stations, and I guess if you're, kind of scouting out the course, you kind of know roughly where some of those places are. Bakeries in Europe, you kind of know you're going to hit those. Um, in some of the more remote situations, like with the Silk Road or maybe some other things you've done, um, what kind of prep do you do for that? In
I
terms
mean,
of what you bring or how you kind of supply yourself to make sure you
I
get through it.
mean, I think in some of these places, like riding the Alaska Pipeline, I knew I wouldn't find food for the first 250 miles, and I was like, well, that's going to take me like 2 days. So then I'm just like carrying basically as much as I can fit. And I mean, and then also it has to be stuff that I kind of want to eat. So for the start, I'm like carrying like lots of like baked goods because I know,
Hmm.
oh, that's going to be like super easy to eat. And then I have like the nut butter for more of a backup. I have um, just anything I can fit. And that was kind of the same for Kyrgyzstan too. It was like just pack a bunch in the beginning and then find whatever you can along the way. I mean, in Kyrgyzstan, if I found like Snickers, I was so pumped. I was like, yeah, because it was like so rare for them to even have that. I mean, at one point in the race, I got to this kind of truck stop area and it was like 2 a.m. So only one spot was open, which I was grateful for. And then I was buying like hard boiled eggs from the counter that had just been sitting there. And then I'm like on my bike peeling them. Like, this is
How do you do that? One-handed?
I mean, I'm like resting my
Yeah.
elbows on the handlebars and just trying to like peel the shells off these eggs. And then, eating a hard boiled egg on its own with like no salt, it's just so dry. And you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, but you're like, well, it's better than nothing. At least there's some protein in it. But
There
I
you
mean,
go.
I got like hard boiled eggs and like a stack of like 5 huge discs of fried bread. And that's what I ate for the next day. It
Wow.
was gross. At least there was something.
What is actually the most disgusting food that you had to eat because you didn't have any alternatives?
Oh my God, that chicken burrito was pretty bad. Let's see. Oh my God, during the Trans Am, I'd always get whatever was in the hot case. And one time I was in like, oh God, where was I? Uh, Trying to remember the state. Maybe it was Montana. I got the one thing that was in the hot case and it was like stapled shut in a paper bag. I was like, well,
Mystery
let's just
food.
get it. Yeah, then I opened it up and it was like this cheeseburger patty, just deep fried in a little disc. I took
Ooh.
a bite and I was like, whoa, what is that? And then I ate the whole thing because that's what I had. But I was like, that is some crazy carnival food.
You must really have such a strong stomach. There really has been no time where your stomach was like, nope, not accepting this one.
I mean, I've been just like, ugh, because like your stomach does not feel good if you're like not sleeping.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the transit was so freaking hot. It was like it hit 106 degrees most of the days. It was unbearable. So for that, I would try to eat like something bigger earlier in the morning when it wasn't like blazing. Because then by the afternoon, there was no way I could eat in that heat. I mean, it's just like impossible. So then I'm at that point drinking iced tea, like sweet tea or Gatorade or whatever I could find. I would also
Yeah.
like go in the gas station and like soak my t-shirt in the sink every chance I got because I was like having like wet clothes on definitely cools you down. But that
Oh
was
yeah.
that was like my only option. I couldn't like take a break and sit in the shade. It was
Yeah.
just so hot and it's so hard to eat when it's so hot.
Ugh, that must have been rough. And those are those times where like we're particularly worried about, your electrolytes, and that's when nausea can really hit too because of the heat and dehydration or electrolyte imbalances or whatever. So it's like keeping track of all those things and performing it like you're just racing. I mean, you are gutting it. it really is mind-boggling to me. It must be
I
so
mean,
hard.
for that race, I was averaging 237 miles a day for 18
insane.
days. It's
That's crazy.
insane. But it's like you
insane.
can't take a break. It's like you got to rush into the gas station, get what you're going to get, and get a move on, because it's like you miss an hour, your average goes way down, and it's so hard to make it back up.
Yeah. Oh, man. And for my listeners, like, definitely check out articles out there. I'll link to something in the show notes about how you passed, what was his name, Stefan or whatever at the end, like on the last day. I mean, like, this is the race that you won outright. And that, I mean, you got to chuckle at that. Like, the thing I love the most, though, is that he wanted to finish together. You're like, hell no. Like, I'm not doing that.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately because I'm
And-
giving a TED talk. I
Yes,
think in a
I saw
couple of
that.
weeks.
So cool.
Yeah, and
What are you
then I'm
talking
like,
about?
sure, I'm telling that story. And so
Good.
then I've been practicing because I have to memorize the talk. So I think about it every single day. And it is just so crazy. This guy's like, let's just finish it together. Like, no way.
Only a
What
man
is
would
the
say
point
that. I'm
of
sorry.
racing? Like, we are,
Yeah.
why have I worked so hard to get to this point?
Yeah, F that.
Forget it. And then
I'm
it's
gonna
like,
beat your ass.
forget it. Yeah, this is a race. So,
Oh man,
yeah,
no, I'll link to that, and definitely looking forward to listening to your TED talk. Is it gonna be online at some point?
It will. Yeah, they're recording it.
Awesome.
I'm doing it in my hometown, Anchorage, Alaska. So I'm super
wonderful.
pumped for that. But yeah, it's definitely intimidating. I've never done anything like that in my life.
You haven't done any kind of motivational speaking or anything like that? I know a lot of athletes do that kind of stuff.
I do it just like off the cuff, nothing formal. And they're like,
Sure.
oh, TED Talk, this is really formal.
Yeah,
you
I'd be
kind of have
terrified.
to be prepared.
Yeah. You'll crush it. You'll do fine. Just speak from your experience, speak from the heart. I'm sure you'll crush it. All right, I have a few more questions on racing and then we'll move on. So have you ever been in a situation where you've just completely run out of food or water because, something unexpected happened, like a mechanical, or you were somewhere really remote or whatever else?
Oh yeah, all the time. It happens all the time.
Tell me some stories.
I mean, like Alaska doing this pipeline. First, it was like freezing temperatures, super muddy, cold. Then the next day, it was like a heat wave, and I ran out of water like twice, 3 times that day because I just had 2 bottles, and I'd like chug a liter, carry what I could, run out of water, be out of water for 3 hours, and then just be so happy when I got some. Yeah, and it's uncomfortable, but it's like, it's not super dangerous. It's just uncomfortable. Your brain's just like, I just want something to drink. But yeah, it's fine. My first bikepacking race in Israel, I ran out of food for like 6 hours, maybe.
Oh my goodness.
And I was just like, your brain is just so out of it. You're just like, I know I'll do a lot better when I get some food. I know I'll do a lot better when I get some food. But like, you just have to keep going.
Was that poor planning or what happened there?
I don't remember.
Because you were so like hungry.
I think I passed through like where this shop or restaurant was in the night when it was closed. Because that's the other part too, is like, it's like the hours of these places. Sometimes you think it's going to be open, then it's not, or you're somewhere like Europe where there's like never open. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, we're open in the daytime, except not between 2 and 5, and then we close again at 6.
And forget like, Sundays.
Fuck yeah, nothing on Sunday at all. Like, oh God, where do these people eat?
Yeah.
So yeah, stuff like that. Trying to think though, nothing where I felt like it was like dangerous. It's just uncomfortable, and you're just like, I know I'm not performing at my best, but whatever. I just have to keep going until I get something.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to hear there have never been like really scary situations in terms of nutrition, at least. I did hear about that really like crazy road. What was it? I forget what it's called.
Oh, the Highway of Tears.
Yeah.
Oh God, so awful.
Yeah, so awful. Anyways, people can read about it. We don't talk about it. Yeah, at least it wasn't about nutrition.
No, it wasn't. It was just women being kidnapped.
Yeah, not being murdered.
There are like billboards all along the highway of just these women that have gone missing, their pictures, their information, dozens and dozens. It's awful.
Yeah. Ugh, crazy stuff. All right. And I think we've covered race nutrition. Is there anything else you want to throw in there that we didn't talk about? I think we covered most of it.
Yeah, that sounds like it. You just have to keep eating, find food, and deal with it. I have like an iron stomach, so I'm super lucky with
Yeah,
that. But
you
the
are
thing is,
very
it's
lucky.
just like not. I love food for the most part, but it's not very enjoyable to eat while racing.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a
you know,
job, as
I,
you
I
said. It's almost like
yeah,
a chore. It just becomes you need to get it in, and that's that, right?
right,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I can only imagine how messed up your body must feel after these long races. You're pushing your body physically to the max. You're barely sleeping. You're eating all these like insane foods for long stretches of time. And even your 24-hour thing, I mean, that's the hard effort for 24 hours without sleep. So, I mean, I've heard you talk about how, I mean, what you do is not healthy or good for your body, but obviously
Yeah.
you love doing it. So I want to chat now about coming off of these races, how you recover, what your favorite foods are for, after you finish event, what's the first thing you crave and what do you continue craving? And how long does it take you to feel good again, or at least back to your baseline?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, after coming off of a race, usually I'm like, I've been eating so much, I don't feel like eating anything. I'm just like, I just want to drink water. Then I sleep. Then I wake up the next day and I'm like famished. But then it's like at that point, any kind of like real meals are good. Eating like eggs, or I even remember after Kyrgyzstan, it was just like eggs and meatballs and whatever they had, like any real food. I was just like, I basically just eating like 4 times as much as I would normally eat. I do feel like the protein shakes have helped with my recovery, where I'm like not feeling so kind of desperate for food, because it does get to a point where it's like it kind of like takes over my mental space. Where I'm like, if I don't eat something, I'm like close to like in a mental breakdown where I'm just like emotional about food, because I'm just like so kind of dependent on it.
Hmm.
Sleep is definitely the most important thing for recovery, but it can be hard the first couple of nights after a race because my body's just in so much pain that it's hard to rest. Or it's like
Yeah.
I go to sleep and I wake up and my hands are totally numb, or like my wrists are in like super pain from being on the bike, or my feet. All these things are just like kind of grouchy. And then a couple of days later, it's usually quite a bit better, and then I can actually like get some good solid sleep, and that seems to help a lot. This past summer, I was doing races that would take me like 4 days, up to 4 days or so, and then I would take a week off, and then I'd do another one.
Wow.
And that was kind of a risk because I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be recovered. But basically, I finished the race, I do absolutely nothing for a week, and then I just go do it again, and it worked.
Mm.
I was like, you kind of don't know how it's going to go, but I just did it, and it was fine. Um, I don't know if I'm at the top of my game, but I'm still doing it and I'm still competing. And then I don't think I've ever been in a race where another woman's beaten me, you know? So,
It's pretty
yeah,
amazing.
I'm trying to win the overall, and the
Oh
stuff, because
yeah,
I
of
really
course.
do think that women have the capacity to win these races overall. There just aren't that many women racing in them. So that's like a huge thing for me, is encouraging more women to give it a go. And that doesn't have to be in competition, but bike packing in general, traveling by bike, these adventures are out there. It's like you can do it competitively, you can have your own experience anywhere in the mix, but I mean, I feel like I just kind of happened upon this sport. And then, I think a lot of women don't even know it exists.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's what I mean. Well, part of what you're doing, I mean, in your grit program or Girls Riding into Tomorrow, right? You founded this biking program for middle school girls in 2017. It started in Anchorage, but I see you've expanded to Tucson, which is awesome. And it's this mentorship program all about building strength and confidence in these young girls, and you're introducing them to this sport early, which is awesome, but you're also kind of helping them with these other really important life skills. So I'd actually love to hear a little bit about that program.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so pumped on this. It's a girls program, first in Anchorage. Now that I'm starting one in Tucson this year, and we ride together for 6 weeks to build up to an overnight adventure ride. And
Mm.
this year. I'll be working with girls that are between 11 and 13 years old, and they're so cool. It's such a cool age. I remember being that age, and it's like when you kind of you want to take on these big challenges, and you're figuring out who you are, and it's like you kind of, a lot is changing. So I love that age. It's also the age when a lot of girls stop doing sports. I feel like when you're like little, you just play, you run around, you have fun with your friends. And then when you get to kind of middle school, high school age, you have all these different pressures. And, if you're not great at sports, you might stop being active. That's what I love about bikes, is that you don't have to be great at it to enjoy it, to do it, to, ride for transportation, ride for adventure. There's so many different things you can do on a bike. So part of it is that we provide the girls, mostly low-income students, with bikes and equipment, and at the end they get to keep them. So then they can come back in future years as student mentors. They can have a bike to get around town, whatever they want to do with it. So it's something I would have loved to do when I was young. I didn't really start riding till later in life, and so that's why I do it. But it's a pretty short program, but it's still so cool to see the girls kind of improve and gain confidence, and just spend time with them, because really so much of it is just spending time outside for the girls with confident women, and the girls just talk. They talk about what's going on in their lives, what they're dealing with. I feel like there's so many kind of different pressures at that age that it's just good to have an outlet.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'd love to know if, especially from your experiences and, seeing other women, girls struggle, and maybe it was a little bit older for you, but does food and body image, does that kind of stuff ever come up in discussions, just given the prevalence of disordered eating and body image issues and all of that in the athletic community, as well as in young girls and boys?
It's never come up in grit in that age.
Mm,
Um, have found that for the most part, a lot of kids are quite a bit bigger than they were when I was young. I
mm,
think, I'm not really sure why, but I do think, like, yeah, more kids are overweight, less active, doing less, but we don't focus on that at all, because it actually
mm,
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your kind of body image is. It's like bikes are for everybody, and,
absolutely.
and a huge part about it is, like, we provide tons of snacks and treats for them, because that's also something that makes you feel, I think kids feel confident and comfortable, because they're like out of their comfort zone.
Of
They're
course.
riding a bike farther than they ever have. Stopping every 40 minutes and having a snack kind of keeps them, like, mentally with it. Even if you don't need that many snacks, it doesn't matter. It's like something that just keeps them going. So I feel like food has been a huge part of the program, as far as, like, yeah, I mean, it's almost like bribery. Hey, get to the top of the hill and I'll give you an M&M.
There you go. Hey,
But
whatever
it
works.
works, or whatever, a cookie, whatever.
Sure.
Uh, but
Absolutely.
yeah, for grit, I have J bars. I don't know if you've heard of this company. It was started by Jess Sarah, and
Mm,
she's a super advocate for getting more women on bikes. And so she's given us all these, like, nutrition bars for the program, and they're like
nice.
great flavors, like pancakes and bacon and apple pie and whatever, and it's like,
Uh-huh.
I think bars have, somewhere close to 300 calories, which is basically like a little meal. You probably don't need that for a 10-mile ride, but why not? And it's also like,
Yeah.
it'd be cool to share with the girls that it's like this. There's a woman cyclist that started her own bar company, and this is her, and she's helping you guys out because she wants you guys to ride your bikes. It's
Yeah.
like, I think these stories, it's like, yeah, riding's one thing, snacks are one thing, but, like, for the girls realizing, like, they could do so many different things with their lives, and by, like, riding their bikes, and yeah, it's hard, but taking on a challenge and overcoming it and gaining confidence, is like they could put that into anything else that they're doing. Along the way, they'll be like, oh yeah, I did that super hard bike ride. This other thing that's stressing me out, it's maybe something I can overcome.
I love it. It's such a cool program that you have, and I hope the Tucson one goes well. When does that one take place?
Yeah, so it's happening. We're starting this Sunday, and then we'll
Oh,
ride together
awesome.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays after school, and every other Sunday.
Very cool.
And then the final trip is a camp out at Catalina State Park,
Oh,
so
how
just north
awesome.
of town.
Very, very cool. All right, just a couple more nutrition questions for you, and then I'll send you on your way because I know you have more of these to do today. So, what does everyday eating look like for you, these days? Do you? I mean, it sounds like you don't really follow any particular eating style, but just kind of curious, kind of what a typical day that might look like when you're just kind of training and doing your thing in between these big events.
Oh yeah, I mean right now actually it's great because I bought my first house in December.
Oh,
So
congrats!
yeah, I'm so pumped. It's so cool, but it's the first time I've really had my own space where, it's like I can cook meals without sharing space with someone else trying to do their own thing.
Mm,
So it's so much freedom. Every morning I make like this huge salad with lemon tahini dressing and rice and avocado toast with eggs, and that's pretty much what I have
yum.
every morning. And what a great way to start the day! It's like always delicious and makes me feel great. I end up making a lot of the same things because that's just what I feel like eating, but that's kind of a staple and mostly just cooking all of our food at home right now unless you're on the road.
Awesome. What are some of your favorite things to cook?
Yeah, so that breakfast, I marinate steaks and then grill them. What else? Making like spaghetti. Trying to think of other things we have. Pizza,
Mm-hmm.
and then putting like avocado and greens on it. So, like a combination of really hearty food and then fresh food. Make a lot of smoothies. Um, yeah, that's about it. Have a good cup of coffee in the morning.
Awesome. And so you just did, this race. Do you have any races on the horizon that you're kind of training for, or what are things looking like right now in terms of your training? I know you have the TED Talk and the grit, but
Yeah.
what about more on the competitive side? What are you prepping for right now?
Yeah, I mean, so mostly stuff around Arizona for right now. And the kind of culmination of that will be a time trial on the full Arizona Trail. So it's
Nice.
800 miles, single track from the Mexican border to the Utah border. It's so hard. It's just so insanely hard because it's a hiking trail. So it's
Uh,
like on a bike, that's tough.
yeah.
It's a lot of walking. But I'll do that beginning of April. I want to make it a group start for women. So open invite, any women can come join and then have, they could ride the full 800, they could ride 300 to Picket Post Trailhead, which is a pretty common distance, or just 140 miles back to Tucson. Just to get more women out there because very few women participate in this kind of stuff. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and then right after that, we'll be going to Europe for the rest of the summer. Um,
Ooh, what are you doing out there?
yeah, so there's a 800 or 900-mile road race in Catalonia. But before that, I'm doing a women's bike packing challenge. So that'll be with 50 women from around the world to ride this route in kind of near Valencia, Spain.
Oh,
And it's a mix
beautiful.
of dirt, pavement, and it's just super beautiful. I've never ridden the route, but that's like not a race, but getting more women on bikes, kind of leapfrogging each other. It's all self-supported, but it's so fun to have a community out there. So this will be the second event like that I've hosted, and gosh, such a blast, so much fun.
And that's awesome. And is Rue, your wife, going to be kind of documenting the whole thing?
Yes, yep, she'll be there.
Awesome. Oh,
So
so cool.
yeah,
It's so
she'll
cool that
actually.
she's like your photographer and I mean, such beautiful. You sent me a few photos for this episode. Such gorgeous work that she does. That's really awesome that she can take part in, your adventures in that capacity.
Yeah, it's so amazing for me to see these photos and then be able to share these stories and have other people have something to look at or videos to share. I'm super super grateful. So fun to work with her too.
Awesome. All right, one last question. What challenges do you still face with your nutrition?
Challenges with nutrition. I mean, my main challenge in all of this riding is my breathing. Like even now, I'm like not even speaking at capacity because I breathed in so much dust. Um,
Mm,
During the 24-hour race I did, it was just so dusty. And so anything with nutrition that could help my asthma would be like a huge help, a huge improvement. So I'm always looking for different stuff. Somebody recommended these Chinese herbs to kind of clear out my lungs. So I've been taking those. I don't know if there's any difference, but anything like that could kind of help me breathe better, I'd be happy with.
yeah.
Otherwise, I feel good about food. I eat a lot, and when it's delicious, I'm happy. When it's not, I deal with it. That's about it.
Seems to be working for you. I mean, you have your inhaler, of course, which, I mean, that's like a whole challenge in itself. And that, I know that cut short your last Tour Divide attempt because of the smoke and everything.
Oh,
But I mean, I
awful.
imagine nutrition, maybe like is drinking just easier for you than drinking your calories, than having to chew? And I imagine that's like harder, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so, with these races, anytime I get some kind of resupply stop, I'll try to drink something super high calorie, whether that's like a juice, a smoothie, milk, whatever, just
Yeah.
because it's such a great kind of supplement to calories. It's like you get a big bang. Or melted ice cream, that's a great one. Yeah, milkshakes, that's great too, because it's like it is a lot faster. But it's like real food is such a huge part of it too. At some point, you're just like, I just can't tolerate anything sweet. And you just need to
Absolutely.
find something a little better. Or even, sometimes it's like not high calorie stuff, but I'm just like, oh, having a pound of strawberries is going to make me feel so much better than whatever else I've been eating. So then I have a little basket of strawberries on my bike, and I'm just like eating them and throwing the green part to the side of the road.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. I always finish these interviews with my quick bites questions, and then I'll send you on your way. Favorite meal or snack when you're in a hurry?
Ooh, man, favorite meal or snack? A salad. Yeah.
Favorite meal or snack when you're not in a hurry?
A salad.
No, what's in this salad? I need to know.
So good. It's like what I've been making every day. It's so I make lemon tahini dressing, mixed greens,
so good.
blueberries, kind of these pickled beets, cucumber, tomato, basil, and then salad with rice. Can't beat it.
I can't blame you. I mean, you're eating like such crazy stuff on the bike. Like having a really fresh, delicious salad, like that must hit the spot so much.
God, it's so good. Or you're just like out there dreaming of like rice and broccoli.
Totally.
It's something so basic, but you're like, oh man, that would be so good. Or a couple of fried eggs. Like, oh God, love that.
I hear you. Favorite post-race meal?
Oof. I had an In-N-Out burger after 24 hours full Pueblo, and that was awesome. So good. So I had
biggest cooking catastrophe.
Biggest cooking catastrophe. Man, time to think. Nothing comes straight to mind. What's yours?
Oh God. There have been too many. Probably set off the fire alarm way too many times. Or smoke alarm. I definitely have switched the salt and the sugar in a baking episode.
Oh, no way.
That's definitely happened. I forgot about something in the oven. Oh yeah, way too many. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, so I'm gonna use that as my excuse. Whatever. Most bizarre or exotic food that you've ever tried?
Ooh, most bizarre. I mean, I think I ate some super weird stuff in Thailand, like kind of like a dried worm. That was not good. Or like they had like crickets that they would eat like potato chips.
Yeah.
But I mean, which sounds fine, but then it was like they were like really, really big, so it's not just like crunchy. There's like something chewy in there too.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't get behind that.
Not great.
Yeah. What is your favorite beverage?
Favorite beverage? Water.
What foods remind? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, that counts. That's whatever answer is the right answer. What foods remind you of growing up? What are your comfort foods?
Salmon. Strawberry rhubarb pie. Yeah, that's about it.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor? Melted or unmelted?
Probably vanilla. But I love ice cream. It's my favorite dessert.
Nice. And top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle?
Bicycle. Let's see. There's this little top tube bag where I put all my snacks called the gas tank. And I guess my helmet.
Awesome. How many bikes do you own, by the way?
I probably have like 4, I think.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you'd have more. I had no idea.
Yeah, I try not to have like tons and tons, but my wife rides the same size, so we can share bikes, which is pretty sweet.
That's helpful. Very good. Awesome. Well, thank you, Lael, so much for your time today. This was so much fun, and I really, really enjoyed chatting with you today, and even just doing all the prep for this interview. Like, you are such an awesome person and athlete, so I really look forward to seeing what else you accomplish, and of course, watching your TED Talk that comes up. So good luck with that.
Thanks so much, and thanks for being so prepared.
Oh, of course. You got a lot out there on you, and it was really fun to research. And also learn about your sport. Like, this is actually a new thing for me. And I mentioned to you when I reached out, one of my private nutrition clients is an endurance cyclist. And he's like, you have to interview Lael in your podcast. I'm like, cool. And I was like, I don't know anything about ultra endurance, like the bike packing and all that. And it was really fascinating to just learn about it and read about your adventures. And I do, distance running and ultras and stuff, mostly just trail running, but it's really fascinating. So huge respect.
Does it make you want to go bike packing?
Maybe not right now. I have a really interesting relationship with cycling, and I mean, I definitely have like fallen off of a road bike before, like clipped in and like totally messed my knee up, and I've just like started that. I'm just always afraid of falling. But I mean, I love cycling, and I remember being young and just riding my bike around the neighborhood, and just that feeling of like freedom and like wind in your face and your hair, and like just seeing so much. So I would love to really get into it more, especially when I get older and like running just hurts my body more.
Yeah,
will. But my mother-in-law, she's like in her early mid 70s and is such a badass on the bike, and she does like these big bike packing trips. They're supported, but still. And she's ridden across the country. I mean, she does all this crazy stuff, and it's awesome. Like I have so much respect for that, and it's such a great role model for my kids. And she really got my husband into endurance activities too. So it's just all awesome. I love hearing about the great things that people are doing for. And it's not, as you said, it doesn't have to be racing. It's just like getting out there and having adventures and like just experiencing the world in different ways. It's all great stuff. Right.
Totally. That's awesome.
Thanks again, Lael. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.
And that wraps up our show for today. Thank you so much, Lael, for your time and for inspiring us all to infuse more adventure into our lives. I'll link to her on social media in the show notes if you want to give her a follow, and we'll also throw some fun movie and other links out there as well on the many things that we discussed in today's show if you want to check them out. If you enjoyed this episode or any of my previous ones, please head on over to iTunes and rate or review the show. There's a link on my website as well as on my profile on Instagram. It helps me spread the word to other listeners, and that helps me keep the show going. This is, of course, free content to you. It requires a ton of work on my end, and that is a very quick and easy way that you can support me and the show. Thank you all, and as always, please feel free to reach out via email or social media if you want to get in touch. Have a great day.